my guest is Tessa Clarke. She's CEO and founder of the food sharing app Olio, which allows people to give away food and other household products instead of throwing them away. The app was created by a team in London 5 years ago and has already reached 4 million users. The Olio community is so excited about the app that more than 25,000 volunteers help picking up and distributing food, and more than 50,000 ambassadors help with the international expansion of the brand to countries like Mexico and Singapore. Tessa, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
For those who don't know it yet, what is Olio?
Olio is an app that exists to tackle the enormous problem of food waste and actually waste more broadly in the home. And we do that by connecting people with their neighbours so that you can give away rather than throw away your spare food and other household items. We grew from a proof of concept via WhatsApp to today, just over 5 years later, we've got a global community of 4 million people.
Can you tell me a little bit of the story behind Olio? How did you found it? And I know that you were not alone. You had a co-founder from the beginning. So can you tell me why did you start Olio in the first place?
So I had what could be described as a fairly classic corporate career for about 15 years prior to founding Olio. And everything changed through a seemingly inconsequential moment in my life. I was living and working in Geneva, in Switzerland, and moving back to the UK. On moving day, the removal men said to me that we had to throw away all of our uneaten food. Now, I'm a farmer's daughter, so I had a well spent or misspent youth, depending upon how you look at it, working incredibly hard on my parents' farm. And as a result of that, I've grown up with a pathological hatred for food waste. So obviously, when the removal men told me I had to throw all this food away, clearly I was not prepared to do that. So much to their irritation, I bundled up my, at the time, newborn baby and toddler and set out into the streets, clutching this food, hoping to find someone to give it to. And to cut a long story short, I failed miserably. Wasn't to be defeated, though. I went back to my apartment, and when the packing men weren't looking, I smuggled the non-perishable food into the bottom of my boxes. And that was the moment when I thought, this is absolutely crazy. I'm going to all these lengths to try and avoid throwing this food away. And at that point in time, I'd spent a good sort of 10 plus years working in the digital space. I knew there was an app for everything. And I couldn't believe there wasn't a simple app where I could advertise this food and a neighbor could request it and pop around and pick it up. And obviously now there is.
You realized there was a user need there, of
Yes.
course. But when did you realize there was also a market?
So my co-founder Sasha and I actually went through a fast but very methodical process from that initial light bulb idea, I guess if you want to call it, through to the launch of our MVP. So the first thing we did was to research the size of the problem, to understand if it was a problem beyond my own unique experience. And our desk research showed very quickly that there was an enormous problem of food waste. Specifically, globally, we throw away a third of all the food we produce each year, which is worth over $1 trillion US. So right there, we've got an enormous marketplace inefficiency. And then the environmental impact of food waste is absolutely devastating. If it were to be a country, it'd be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the USA and China. And what we were really shocked to discover is that in a country such as the UK, but broadly anywhere that could be described as the developed world, half of all food waste takes place in the home. So the average UK family throws away roughly 20% of the weekly shop. It's worth £700 sterling per family per year, collectively adds up to £14 billion of perfectly good food going off to landfill. So it was very clear to us from our desk research that this was a really, really significant problem from every angle. But that didn't mean to say it was a problem that people cared about. So the next step we did was a market research survey that we distributed via lots of Facebook groups, etc. And the key insight that we got back from that was that 1 in 3 people told us that they were physically pained throwing away food. And that told us, hang on a minute, this is a pretty mainstream problem. There has been zero innovation since the rubbish bin. I am sure we can fix this problem with digital technology coupled with community. So we then realized it's a big problem on paper. It's a problem people care about, but that didn't mean to say that people would take the next step in our hypothesis, which was that they would share food with a stranger. And we wanted to test that hypothesis without investing our life savings building an app that, in all probability, no one would want. So how we did that was via a WhatsApp proof of concept. We, via email, organized an experiment where we reached out to 12 people who had completed the market research survey, who said they were physically pain throwing away good food. They hated food waste, obviously. They didn't know each other. They didn't know us, but they all lived close to one another. We put them on this WhatsApp group and we said, for 2 weeks, if you got any spare food, here are some people you can share it with. We waited sort of with bated breath for I think about 48 hours for the first share to happen. And it did, thank goodness. And then in the ensuing 2 weeks was actually a lot of sharing took place via that WhatsApp group. And that was then what gave us the conviction to invest our savings to build an app that would solve this problem more elegantly than a WhatsApp group.
Exactly, precisely at this point, I want to ask you how the app actually works. So today, how long does it take for a transaction
Mm-hmm.
to go through? I don't know if you call it transaction. I mean,
Yeah,
it's donation, right?
it's
So how
transaction.
does
Yeah.
it work? I mean, who are the users? Are they
Mm-hmm.
actually neighbors?
Mm-hmm.
Are givers and receivers really in the same neighborhood?
Yeah.
Do they have to travel to pick up food? How does it work?
Lots of questions there. I'll sort of start at the beginning as to how does the app itself work. So it takes roughly 10 seconds to add something to the app. You snap a photo and add your listing. Neighbors living nearby get an alert letting them know something new has been added near them. They can then browse the listings, request what they want, and pop round and pick it up. So whilst Olio at first pass looks like it's an app, its beating heart actually are those thousands and thousands of doorstep connections that are taking place every single day. We're connecting neighbors in real life to share. And in terms of how quickly it takes for a transaction to occur, half of all the food added to the app is requested in less than 21 minutes. So the demand for this food is off the charts. And we also now have a non-food section in the app where people are giving away toiletries and cleaning products and books and kitchen appliances and clothes and toys, things they don't want to sell. They don't want to ship halfway across the country. They just want to press a button and automatically a smiling, happy neighbor shows up to take it off their hands. And so in the non-food section, half of all the listings added to the app are requested within anywhere between 4 or 4.5 hours. So the demand is really, really strong. And over 60% of the transactions take place between neighbors who are living within a 10-minute walk of one another.
Are these people actually looking at the app all day long, waiting for things to
There,
come
there
up,
are
or do they receive
there are
notifications
some
and who do
people.
you
Well, so
notify?
we do have notifications, and you can customize them according to both for food and for non-food, the frequency with which you want your notifications, and also the radius with which they will to which they'll apply. Yes, there are some people who spend all day long on Olio. We do have kind of our power users are doing on average 3 pickups per day. So Olio really is kind of their life. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there are people who perhaps just use it to give something away. They have a bit of a clear out once a month, and we have everything in between.
What is the profile of people that are picking up food?
So our audience to date has been very, very reflective of the UK population as a whole, both in terms of age and also sociodemographic and ethnicity. The really significant skew that we have is in terms of gender. So, depending upon when we measure it, anywhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of our community are female. And then in terms of age, we slightly over index on that sort of 25 to 44-year-old audience as well. So that kind of millennial female is really our heartland.
Are they people that are really worried about the environment? Are they people that just don't want to throw food away?
Mhm.
Are they people that are really in need right now that can't really afford to buy food, maybe?
So I think there's a mix of all of the above, but what unites our community is their dislike of waste. So when we survey our community and ask them why they joined Olio, anywhere between 80 to 90% are saying they joined Olio because they hate waste. And that is really a very motivating factor for them. And I think it's also a very universal human sentiment. Of course, we have evolved to dislike wasting, in particular food, which after all is our life source. But indeed, waste of any variety, we don't particularly enjoy. So that's what really, really unites people. And then that next sort of level below that, there's a whole variety of reasons why people are using Olio. For many people, it is an environmental thing. It is about making a difference, trying to lead a more sustainable life. For other people, the community angle is much more powerful for them. They're using this as a really kind of safe, easy, low commitment way to get to meet their neighbours and feel more connected with their local community. And then, of course, we have an app with thousands and thousands and thousands of items of free food and other household items. And so, yes, there's a strong contingent of bargain hunters as well.
And I heard in a different podcast interview you gave that you do have volunteers that help picking up and delivering the food. Can you tell me about that? Why do you need people to help with us with the
Mhm.
process? Because normally donors and receivers they do live
Yeah.
close to each other. So why do you need this
So they're
intermediary?
not an intermediary. So you're absolutely correct. We have now 25,000 trained volunteers. They're called Food Waste Heroes. And what they do is we recruit them through the app. We train them online on our proprietary food safety management system and then dynamically match them with their local business, which might be a supermarket such as a Tesco or a food to go business such as Pret a Manger or perhaps a local deli or corporate canteen. And as a trained food waste hero, you can claim a collection slot. And on that allotted time and day, you pop out of your house across the road. You go collect all of the unsold food from that local business. You take that home, you add it to the app. Within minutes, your neighbors are requesting it. Minutes later, they're popping round to pick it up. And that takes that food from having been 1 to 2 hours earlier considered as a waste stream in the store to instead fully redistributed into the homes of the local community. And that actually is how we first started monetizing Olio. So those businesses, at the moment, they pay a waste contractor to take that food off, maybe to, best case anaerobic digestion, worst case to landfill. Instead, they're now paying us to ensure that food's redistributed into the local community. And we developed this program because it's a really, really effective fire starter to get the flywheel of sharing happening in any one sort of hyperlocal geography. Because once we've got a business signed up, we have a large volume of highly desirable food coming onto the app regularly, which then kickstarts that sharing experience. Because we find that people who pick up an item first are then 5 times more likely to go on and share from their own home afterwards. A bit like Airbnb, most people stay somewhere first, realize how easy that was, and go on to then become a host themselves.
Okay, but you do have these heroes, these volunteers, I'm
Hmm.
assuming, because it's easier for the local business to deal with just one person that picks up the
Correct.
food than, I don't
Yeah.
know, dozens. So that's
Yes.
why
So
that makes sense.
when we first launched Olio, we worked with a couple of local businesses, and we had hoped that they would want to use the app themselves to bring incremental traffic into the store, to generate incremental revenues, cross sell, upsell, brand positioning, etc. But what we quickly found was that they have exceptionally high store staff turnover, and they are so focused on their core operations that the last thing they want to be doing is messing around with an app or a stream of people coming in and out of the store wanting some sort of specific thing that has been reserved for them. And so that was to solve that problem for those businesses and also to solve another problem we had in the early days, which was that our early adopters hated food waste, therefore didn't generate any food waste. So we thought, well, why don't we take the people who hate food waste, don't generate any, so they have lots of time but no food, and match them up with the businesses that have lots of food and no time. And that has worked really very well for us.
I'm trying to understand the incentives of each part involved in that
Mm-hmm.
process. So, two questions. Why is it interesting for the volunteers, besides the fact that they're contributing to a cause that they
Yeah.
believe in? But why is it interesting for them? And why is it interesting for local businesses to deliver the food through the app to people
Mm-hmm.
that need it instead of
Mm-hmm.
delivering that to a food contractor?
So if we take the volunteers, the food waste heroes first, we have 25,000 trained volunteers who are all sort of competing or jostling to access anywhere between 5 and 10,000 collection slots per week. So we have an enormous bench, I guess, of trained volunteers who are looking for an opportunity to step into action. And the reason why there's such high demand to volunteer is because, first of all, when you go pick up all of that food, you see this enormous quantity of beautiful food, and you get this really visceral feeling of sort of, oh my gosh, if it wasn't for me, this would all be thrown in the bin. So immediately you feel pretty validated and you feel like you're doing something special. You then get to take it home and distribute it to your local community. So you're a bit like Father Christmas or Santa Claus in your local community, handing out all this free food. You do it from the convenience of your own home. It's done generally out of work hours, and it's very social. It's a really, really great way to meet people locally, build relationships, and sometimes you are making a real difference to someone else's life, which feels incredible. And then the third reason why people do it is we allow our volunteers to keep up to 10% of what they collect if they would like as a thank you. So we have a very, very, very intrinsically motivated set of volunteers. And then on the business side, I think the best way to describe what's happening there is via analogy. So in the fashion industry, child labor used to be endemic. It was pretty embedded in the business model. And that has now been collectively agreed that that is unacceptable, and it's been broadly measured and monitored out of supply chains. The same now is happening with food waste for food retail and also for the events industry. It's been seen as completely unacceptable by customers, by employees, to be throwing away perfectly good food when there are so many good alternatives for it to ensure that it is eaten. So now from the sea level down, there's no food retailer that doesn't have a really significant function that is directly tackling the problem of food waste and trying to eliminate it from the business, and where they can't, to ensure that as much of it as possible is redistributed to the local community. And I should say at this point that Olio works in a very complementary way with the charitable sector. So most businesses, when they realize that they have some surplus that needs redistributing, the first thing they want to do is to ensure that as much of that as possible goes to people in need. And so they tend to work with charitable redistributors. Now, the charitable sector at the moment is redistributing roughly 5% of the industry's surplus. And by its own admission, once it's fully scaled, it will be able to redistribute roughly a quarter of the industry's surplus, which leaves 3/4 of the industry's surplus with no solution. And so that's where Olio steps in. We're the collector of last resort, and we're able to offer our clients an extremely effective, very compliant, totally trackable national service that enables them to finally achieve zero food waste stores. So it's a very compelling proposition for them.
Tessa, what is the business model behind this? Because in the end, you're distributing free food. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make this a sustainable business?
Yeah, so just I guess very briefly, it's probably helpful if I just dial back a little bit and just describe where Olio is today. So we've moved on quite a bit from being a food waste app to something much broader and bigger than that. So really, Olio is about reinventing consumption and making consumption two things: hyperlocal and sustainable. And so we enable people to give away and to receive free food and other household items. Shortly, we'll be launching a section in the app connecting neighbours to be able to lend and borrow everyday household items. So a cat carrier, a stamping camping stove, a drill, a lawnmower, um, kids' fancy dress costumes, books, etc. So we'll be connecting people to give things away for free, to borrow items. Then we also have a section in the app called Made, which we've already launched, which connects people to their neighbours so that they can buy and sell homemade food and handmade crafts. Um, so that's really so the reinventing consumption is that when you want to consume, actually the first place you will go to is Olio, because you will take for free what your neighbor no longer wants. You will borrow what your neighbor is not currently using. And when you do want to buy brand new, you'll buy something made locally with love. And So then in terms of kind of monetizing that, as I said, we've already started monetizing via the Food Waste Heroes program, which is a classic sort of B2B type operation. And then in terms of monetizing the C2C piece, the first, we're kind of early on what will be a long journey there. And the first step that we've taken very recently is introducing a freemium business model. So you can subscribe to unlock extra features within the Olio app. But in time, we'll be doing things like bringing payments in app around Made, for example, and being able to have a commission-based business model. And there's a number of other things that we're going to be experimenting with further down the line.
I actually I have the app here, and I tried it out. And there is this section where you have suggestions. So things books you should read, or maybe
Yeah, goals. Yeah,
goals and challenges exactly that you should pick up.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I see that this is an opportunity for other vendors to get in touch with the audience at Olio. So, for example, you suggest,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
recommend a book, and then there's the Amazon link
Mm-hmm.
to buy this book, for example. Or why
Yeah.
not, uh, start trying out a bamboo made toothbrush, and
Mm-hmm.
there you have the
Yeah.
manufacturer and a link to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How has that been working so far? How successful has that strategy been?
Yeah. So the goals section, which can probably be most easily described as being a little bit like Tinder for sustainable living. So we have a pack of, I think it's roughly 130 goals in total. And you, when you first join Olio, you get 30, and then each week another 5 are given to you. And you right swipe on the goals you want to do, left swipe for maybe later. And as you say, each of those goals enables you to make a simple swap to lead a more sustainable life. And it starts from really easy things like swapping your plastic toothbrush for bamboo, all the way through to changing your energy provider, moving your bank account, etc. And you're absolutely correct. We do have a number of affiliate links through that section of the app. The goals section, at the moment, its main role really is an engagement feature, in particular in new markets. As we are sort of starting to build traction there, it gives people something really meaningful to do. And we also have the forum section, which is essentially kind of, I guess, like a Facebook page. And those two things are our engagement driving features. And we have had well over 500,000 goals successfully completed by people. And it's been really, really well received by our community, who are telling us that they're aware there's a climate crisis. They know they need to do better. They just have no idea where to start. And they just kind of want someone to tell them what to do. And I personally have been on a journey for several years to of research to understand what it looks like to lead a more sustainable life. And we've kind of distilled all of that into this really fun, easy to use, sort of gamified user interface.
And are you planning on testing other revenue sources? I'm assuming that hyperlocal advertising, for example, could be one of them.
Yeah, so we really don't want to go down the social media model of advertising, because that would just be extremely counter to everything we believe in. And also, our community is based on positivity, and that's what our users really, really love about Olio. It's a really positive, friendly, collaborative space, unlike um, many of the other major social media networks. So we wouldn't go down that sort of eyeballs type model, but certainly in the future, we do believe there's enormous potential for relevant hyperlocal advertising for local businesses. Yes.
Can you tell me about funding? How have you been funded so far?
So we have, well, Sasha and I bootstrapped for the first year, and then we've raised 4 rounds of equity financing. We've raised just over 11 million pounds sterling, and we have two types of investors really. We have what could be described as classic Silicon Valley style VCs. So our largest investors are Excel and also Octopus Ventures. And then on the other hand, we have a slightly newer breed of investor, the impact investors, and we have a couple of funds there, such as Rubio out of the Netherlands, Norsken out of Sweden, Mustard Seed in London, and Quadia in Switzerland, who are investing in us just as much for the environmental and social return we're generating as the future financial return that we will generate as well.
So it didn't take that long to get the support of the first investors.
No, we always knew Olio is a model that is only going to work really at scale. So we knew that we would have to take funding very early in our journey. And we have an enormous ambition. We want 1 billion Olioers by 2030. We've been very, very clear that that's the type of business that we want to build. That's the scale that we need to achieve. And so it was an obvious choice for us to go down the venture capital path.
How hard was it to start raising money, and did that change?
Our first round of financing, our seed round, I went and asked for advice and got investment, which is a fundraising strategy I dearly love to replicate. So that was our easiest round by quite some measure. But thereafter, fundraising has always been, I guess, disproportionately challenging for us because we are tech for good, which is still a really new category. It's not like we're fintech or AI or crypto or anything else that's sort of super hot. So we're tech for good. We're female founded, and we all know what those statistics look like. Here in the UK, female founded businesses get 1% of all venture capital investment. Male founded businesses get 89%, and mixed teams get the delta. So obviously, being a female founded business is challenging as well. We've been early revenue. We have always had much more of a Silicon Valley style approach to building our business and to growth. And that doesn't mesh quite so well with the more European investment mindset, which is much more focused on earlier profitability. And then we've always been a remote first business as well, which prior to COVID was considered pretty anomalous. So we are definitely non-normative, as one of our investors called us.
You just told me about your ambitious plan for the
Mhm.
next few years. When do you think, or when do you plan Olio would become profitable? Or is that something you're not thinking about right now?
That's not a priority right now. Our priority is building sustainable revenue streams. Absolutely, that's a priority. But profitability is not. We've got to get to 1 billion people, and that's going to require investment and very rapid growth.
Tessa, as the business is growing so rapidly, how do you see, do you think it could be an issue that you have so many people supporting the business as volunteers? Let me try to explain what I mean by that. So, the fact that you have thousands of people, am I right, supporting this business either as volunteers or ambassadors, this is something that many business can only dream of, right? Having this kind of support for your business and for your mission, which is something incredible. But as you grow and as you eventually at some point also become profitable, do you think this could hurt the model that you have right now? Do you think it could become a problem that these volunteers think, okay, but here I am working for free, supporting a profitable business? Do you think this could be an issue?
So this is certainly something for us to be very mindful of. And these are conversations we're already having with our community. From day one, we have been really explicit about the fact that we are a business and not a charity. And we've always operated with a really, really high level of transparency. So if you go onto the FAQs section of the Olio app, there's a lot of detail there about well, we've got a whole page which is about how we make money and how we think about making money. And I think the most important thing to understand, and that the majority of our community really, really gets, is that we have we are really pioneering something new, which is, profit with purpose, business for good. And the majority of our community gets that. They say, well, actually, hang on a minute, we would rather that Olio gets to scale and is having all these positive impacts and is a sustainable, healthy business than be a subscale charity. Now, don't get me wrong, not everybody understands that. The level of kind of business knowledge across the population as a whole is definitely patchy. There are some people who do not get that, but I think more and more people are getting very frustrated by the very outdated dichotomy that we live in, which at the moment says if you do good, you must be a charity, but you probably don't scale. And if you want to scale really, really rapidly, then you will be a business, but you're probably generating a ton of horrible negative externalities. And we believe very firmly that the future lies in that third way, which is profit with purpose at scale. That is only how the world's biggest problems are going to get solved. And I also believe that that is going to generate outsized return for investors as well. Where would you rather put your money? Into the company that's delivering a profit of X, but is destroying the environment, destroying local communities, treating all of its stakeholders very badly, or into another company that's delivering profit X, but that is having all these positive externalities.